Okay, and we are live. So this is my second go at this because the first one I was using a different platform. So a few days ago, I went to put a R8 stream out, and I decided, let me get these headphones off because I think my audio is okay. I decided to use a platform by the name of EVMux, and it's one of these streaming IP-based platforms. It does all kinds of great stuff, but I couldn't get the stream to be stable for the life of me. So I'm redoing this. I'm now trying StreamYard after doing a bunch of troubleshooting, different switchers, different sources, different ways to get the information into my router. So my area right here is not particularly good at, at streaming. So just the up bandwidth that's available in my area is a little bit less than par. So I'm trying out StreamYard right here. I've got the comments up. I can already tell you what I don't like about it right now is I can't see if anybody is watching. If anybody is watching and I can see, oh, James Jackson, what up? Well, now I know that at least James Jackson is watching. So, James, what do you use for streaming software? Because I know that you do streams, and I think I've seen you highlight comments before too. So on this one on StreamYard, I can highlight your comment like this, and I don't know. I guess I'll take a look back on the YouTube replay and see if it's stable or not. So James is actually a pretty good. Everybody should check out his channel. He's a good guy to have in on this stream too because he uses Canon cameras. I use hardware called Yellow Box. I've looked at that. Um, I've looked at that. I didn't quite understand why you would want the monitor and switcher, and it seemed like an odd product to me. But maybe I'll give it another go. I still think that my problem in my area, and it's funny because I live in a very populated area of California. I have no idea why my stream would be so choppy and so slow, but with my ISP in the area, I have the fastest that I can have, which typically means, because they blast out the downspeed on all their marketing. It's gig downspeed or 5 or whatever it is, right? But then the upspeed's like 40 megabits a second. When they don't advertise that because they know it stinks. So anyway, I wanted to do so. This is my second attempt, like I said, at this stream, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the Canon R8 that came out just a few days ago, and whether it is going to be good in comparison to the R6 Mark II, and also just for real estate photography. That's what I talk about a lot on this channel is real estate photography. It always gets into other subjects, and I enjoy all the other subjects. But just putting the R8 in the bounds of real estate photography, um, I think it is going to be an extraordinarily successful camera for Canon, and I think Canon really did well with the R8 to differentiated enough from the R6 Mark II that they're not going to take sales out of the R6 Mark II because the other things the R6 Mark II gives you over the R8 are things that are worthwhile paying $1,000 more for. So you got the bigger battery, you've got 2 card slots, you have in-body image stabilization. I mean, but what they did with the R8, and this is a lot, this is kind of what they did with the RP versus the EOS R, is they gave the R8 all the stuff that matters of the R6 Mark II. So it has that same sensor. And that's really the big thing. It has the same or similar enough focusing system, allegedly, and that's a big deal. So allegedly anything that you shoot with an R8 and anything you shoot with an R6 Mark II ought to be pretty interchangeable. And if you're paying $1,000 less for that other body, and you don't need that bigger battery life, and you don't need 2 card slots, if you don't need IBIS, and so a lot of time filmmakers, like I know James uses the Canon C200b, and I use all kinds of other, cine-like cameras that do not have sensor stabilization. I prefer not to have sensor stabilization, um, especially with the Canons. The Canon hasn't really quite figured it out as well as Sony, and certainly not as well as Panasonic, who has been the gold standard for sensor stabilization for a long time. With the Canons, with the wide angle lenses, you get the wide angle wobble. So let's take a look at some of the comments here. James, yeah, Yellow Box Mini. Yeah, I've seen. Now that is kind of like a switcher and it's a switcher and a monitor all in one. Like I said, I didn't quite understand what the product is. Um, and being that I'm a guy who kind of lives in this space, I would imagine that would be a common problem for them. So what is this thing? you know, it's a good all in one. It also allows 4G SIM, so I can. Oh, okay. So you can take it outside. Pretty much anywhere you get a 4G signal and stream like that. That's interesting. See, now I think technically, I think you can do that with an A10 Mini also. You can dongle a cell phone for it to it and use the 4G or I don't know 5G with it. I think the R8 is a sleeper for virtual conferences. Can't wait to hear your thoughts regarding real estate. Yeah. Um, so another couple things that are pertinent just for real estate, okay, are going to be the app on board and how well it wirelessly tethers. And the reason for that is because this is how I work, and I think a lot of real estate. I think most of us work like this these days. Is um, we're locked off on a tripod, but since we're taking composite images of interiors, and so I'm going to have a different layer for my ambient frame than I am for a flash frame. I might pop flashes in different places to give, a different look, brighter exposures, true up colors, things like that. And then we composite it all in post. And so we're locked off on a tripod. And what we do is we use the inboard apps that these cameras all natively have these days to be able to control that. So I have my iPad with me, and using the native Canon app or the native Sony app, I will have it up on my iPad while I have my tripod right here. And so while I'm compositing, I'm going to adjust the values with the tripod, and I know that my camera is not going to move. So that's pretty important for real estate, that it has native app control. Now, the R8 says it does, um, but the Canon app is just not the greatest. And it's not the greatest because, well, first off, it was originally designed. This is the Canon Connect app I'm talking about. This is the one that you can access with all their mirrorless cameras to date. The majority of them anyway. It was designed for a cell phone. And so the resolution is like 480 or something like that, and when you have, like, I have the R5C, right? So if I have the R5C and I've got a 45 megapixel sensor aimed at the thing, and I've got now a 480 image. I mean, it's bad enough if you're looking at it on a cell phone, but if you blow it up to iPad Pro, type of screen size, it looks blurry and it looks out of focus. And that's a tough way to work. you think when you think what you're pointing your camera at is out of focus all the time. Now, luckily, Canon has their focus assist tool, right, with the arrows that converge and become the green box when something's in focus, and that certainly is helpful, and you can trust that tool. So within the app, you can poke on the screen and have whatever you have defined as your focus point, and then using the focus ring on your lens, bring it into focus, and it's still going to look blurry on the app just because of the poor resolution of the app, but you can trust that that's going to be in focus. So that's important for real estate photography. Even though the app is terrible, I can't fault the R8 for that, because that's not the R8's problem. That's just a Canon problem. Okay. And to put it in contrast, and I did a video which kind of shows this like a little while ago, and I might actually do a more in-depth video of the actual all of the differences between the Canon Connect app and the Sony Imaging Edge app that you can get with the Sony cameras, because the Sony one is much better in a lot of ways. it allows you to work faster. But I'm not going to make this about that because we're talking about the R8. So the R8 does have app control that is advantageous for real estate photography. It is perhaps not the best implementation of a control app. I would love for Canon to redesign that app, especially since they're putting it in, the capability of controlling via that app in their higher resolution cameras. You're kind of going to want to you're, they need a better app. And honestly, I'm a bit surprised. A company the size that Canon is, and that Canon's into all kinds of professional, medical imaging devices. I'm surprised that their app really is still that poor because it is. I've seen much better apps from, in products that are from companies that are way smaller and less solvent than is Canon. So that's one of the things that's important about that. So the other thing that is uniquely important for real estate photography in general is flash sync, mechanical flash sync speed, or no, I shouldn't say mechanical because it could be really any kind of shutter, but maximum flash sync, right? So to give you another example, right? If I have my flash here and I've got my flash controller on the hot shoe, I'm going to be sometimes moving around the area that I'm in while my camera is right there still. And what is the maximum shutter speed that I can go up to with my flash? So the reason that matters, and just like the other thing with the app, you can take a look back at my previous videos where I will show you the example with the Sony Alpha 1 of a 1/400th of a second flash sync shot inside an interior exposure to balance ambient light with window light. And why does that work? Well, it works because your strobe fires faster than whatever cycle your shutter speed falls at, right? So the strobe fires at like 1/15,000th or something like that, right? And so your shutter speed on your camera, for all practical purposes, is not going to affect your flash power at all. What it will affect, though, is the ambient exposure, right? So, for instance, here's where 1/400th that the Alpha 1 has comes into play. If I have a 200-watt second light and I have a very dark room like this one that I'm in right now, and I have nuclear window light blowing in this window over here, I want to illuminate this room to relatively the same exposure as that window. That way, when I'm compositing all my layers later on, I don't have like light blooming over the window and things like that. So, but if my light that I have is only, let's say, a 70-watt speed light or something like that, that's not going to do much for this room. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to crank up my ISO value. So when I crank up my ISO value and I go from like 100, I go up a stop to 200, I go up 2 stops to 400, whatever. Let's say I go all the way up to 640, right? So my little 70-watt light now is going to be much more powerful than it was at, a few stops more powerful than it was at ISO 100. But what's going to happen? Also, what's going to happen is my window light's going to get a lot brighter as my ISO goes up and up and up and up. And so in order to cut that window light down, but still have my light powerful, I need to increase my shutter speed. So if I increase my shutter speed by a few stops, right, and now I go up to, let's say, 1/200th, I now have a powerful light because I cranked up my ISO, but my window, my ambient exposure is controlled because I cranked up my shutter speed, right? I'm getting less light into my sensor. So that is important for interiors photography, for real estate photography, to be able to control the ambient light versus the power of your light. It would be great if I, carried around on me like a 600-watt second light or whatever, but they're giant, they're massive, and this is run and gun stuff. I go with a 200-watt second Godox 8200. And that is the most popular light, by the way, for amongst real estate photographers. We all use them because they're awesome, right? So things that make I'll go back again to the Sony Alpha 1. the best camera for real estate photography right now is that one esoteric spec that nobody ever gives much traction to on YouTube because it's a very specific thing. It's something that I don't know if that spec really matters or means much outside of real estate photographers and real estate photography. Portraiture, I can see how it would mean something to portraiture, when you're using studio strobes and stuff. But the fact that you can go up to 1/400th and still get that sync. Okay. And so by that, the sync, I mean, you're not getting artifacts of the shutter getting in the way, right? So you won't get like the banding, the dark banding across the bottom because the shutter's not fast enough to sync up with the light. The A1 goes up to 1/400. That's more than any other camera on the planet, with the exception of some of the medium format systems with mechanical leaf shutters. But as far as the pedestrian brands go, the Sonys, the Canons, the Nikon, that's top of the pile. 1/400th. So the R5C is specified to go to 1/250th. In practice, I cannot get a clean shot at 1/250th. I have to dump down to 1/200th to not get any of those artifacts on the bottom of the screen with the R5C, which is strange because when I first got that camera, I thought it was a 1/250th camera. And unlike the Sony app, the Canon one does allow you to exceed the maximum flash sync, and then you just you get the artifacts. The Sony one will let you do it, so it knows what camera is there, and so, you can't go faster in this on the flash, right? But it's really a 1/200th camera, and I did confirm afterwards, and it's 1/250th. It's published all over the place. I don't know if my copy is just bad somehow, you know, but the R8 is a 1/200th camera, so how much does it matter compared to, let's say, the A1? Um, that's a whole stop difference, that it's got in flash sync. So I don't think the R6 Mark II, I think it might be 1/200th. I'm not sure what the R6 Mark II is, but okay, let's see. Yeah, the apps need to be updated. Love the cinema version though, but even that is a bit dated. I don't, I, I've actually never used the cinema control app because it's IP based. Um, and that just seems like a pain in the neck to me. So I've never really explored it much. Um, I don't know. Maybe you can tell me why why the cinema version is a lot better than the stills version. I mean, is it better resolution? Can you actually see in any kind of like real resolution what it is? Because I'm telling you, the stills one's awful. It's just not a good application. It So one of the other things, okay, on the Canon versus Sony, and the reason that I go with Canon versus Sony a lot is because obviously that's the stuff that gets the traction on YouTube, but also because that's what I use. I have a Canon loadout and I have a Sony loadout, and so I'm and I use both of them professionally, so I actually am a pretty good source to compare back and forth, right, with different things. So the Canon Connect app versus the Sony app. So one of the things that makes the Sony app so much better to work with in a workflow is that I can so both I don't know if you can do this with the Canon. With the Sony, you can specify whether you and it downloads the image from the camera to the application that you just took. If you have a preview of that image and how long you have a preview of that image for, or if you have to, manually cancel the preview. So if I go and I take a shot, and then it shows up on the iPad the shot that I just took, I can define whether to keep that on for a couple seconds, or I don't want to see it at all, or I want to whatever, right? So the Canon, I don't think can define that, but you will see it has a little thumbnail that the image pops up when it's done downloading from the camera. The problem is on the Canon app, when the image is downloading from the camera, and so if you have, let's say, the R5C, which is what I have, and that's a 45 megapixel uncompressed RAW is how I'm shooting. And it's actually a pretty efficient file. It's a lighter file than the Sony RAWs are, but it still takes 3 to 5 seconds or so to transfer the small JPEG even because you can define what you want to transfer over to the iPad to preview what you just shot as you're recording the large file onto the camera body. It still takes 3 to 5 seconds. Now, the problem is you're locked up in that 3 to 5 seconds. You cannot adjust your values. So on the Canon app, you have kind of it looks like a ruler down on the bottom, and you slide that ruler back and forth. The big lines on the ruler are full stops, and then there are smaller lines between those full stops that are, I think, in 1/3 stop increment. I think you might be able to change that up, but I have mine in 1/3 stop increments. And it's a really great way to do that, by the way, because it's really nice to visualize, especially if you're trying to do things like balance exposures with ambient light and flashlight. I know that if I go a stop up in ISO, I'm going to have to go a stop up in shutter speed. And to have that visual representation of the lines right there that you go from one to, that's actually a pretty good way of doing that. But like I said, the problem is you're locked up. You can't do anything when that image is coming over. And so if I let me grab my Red Bull can strobe again here. So if I am shooting a room and I want to put a flash pop right here, oops, and a flash pop right there, okay, with the Canon app, I can adjust my values, flash pop, and then nope, not yet. It's not over. It's not over yet. It's not over. Okay, now it's there. Now I can do a flash pop because it takes that few seconds to download the image to the iPad before you can take the next image. With the Sony app, if I decide not to have the image preview on the screen, and I can still always see it because I can see that it's there. It populates like a just like the Canon does, like a little thumbnail or whatever, right? If I decide not to have the image on the screen, I can still take another shot, and even more importantly, I can still adjust my values. With the Canon app, when you're waiting for the image to download, you can't adjust your values either. Now, again, this is the kind of stuff, okay, it's just like the 1/400 flash sync stuff. This is the kind of stuff that doesn't get traction on YouTube, probably because a lot of the YouTube reviewers, they don't go out and work with these things professionally outside of doing reviews. And I'm not trying to take anything away from any of them because they do give us very useful information, but a YouTube review is going to be a camera pointed at a pretty girl, and then they send it back or to some other press person, like a couple days later. So, I mean, it's you gotta learn also from people who are who are using these things. Okay, so the Cinema app, it has a live view that you can tap the screen. Been a while since I used it, but the live view is solid. Yeah, so I should, so my C200s, and that's what I'm using right now is a C200, and I have another one right there, but I'm only using one for this. I've thought about setting up that whole thing so I can, because they're networkable, and I can do like multi-cam, but it's like, it's YouTube Studio, man. Like most people are going for it with an iPhone and a ring light, like I'm already way too deep as far as that goes. I might try it though. We'll see. I don't know if there's a lot of benefit. Here's the thing, James. Like I like to try to keep things simple, man. Like I really do, and that's why like the C200 is a good example of this. I sold my red Komodo. I did, and I love the red Komodo. I sold the red Komodo because I always had to have a bunch of crap hanging all over it. I always needed an audio solution with the Red Komodo because it doesn't have any audio really. It's got a 3.5 millimeter in. The preamp is awful. It's just not. It's made to capture scratch audio so you can sync it. I mean that's really what it is. Um, the Komodo has a rudimentary autofocus, but it's not anything that, and I tried it even doing like this kind of stuff, like the YouTube talking head kind of stuff. And if I try the face detect, which is the new thing that the Komodo does, um, it works. But the problem is when it loses a face, it wigs. you know, and so there's not like the Canon right here I have on, let me look at my monitor right here. So I have the Canon right here on face only autofocus, right? So if I go, it should stay with my face, should stay with my face. If I go up here, it's still going to stay with my face. But even if it lost my face, it's going to stop, and you know this too, James, because I think the C70 does the same thing, and the R5C I think does too. Um, and it works really, really well. It works so well that you can go into a corporate gig as a one-man band and rely on it, and set up like your B cam, just like on your slider right over there or whatever, and make sure it locks onto the subject's face. And if your subject is sitting in a chair, they're not going to move that far, and so even if it loses them momentarily, it's not going to wig out, and shift to the background. In the Komodo autofocus, it does that. So uh, the Canon's autofocus is better on the C200. It has audio on board that's pretty good, good enough that I can trust it. Um, it has built-in NDs, which is one less thing that you got to, with Komodo, you don't have NDs, and you can get like the ND adapter, right? So the RF to EF lens adapter with the variable ND in it. I don't like variable NDs. I've never met a variable ND that didn't like mess with my colors somehow. It's the same reason I don't like polarizers, by the way. And I know those are fighting words because there are a lot of people who swear by polarizers and tell me even for real estate photography, oh, you need polarizers to cut down on like I hate polarizers. Every polarizer I've ever used makes my colors look like Bollywood, like I don't want the Bollywood look on everything that I shoot. It's good for Bollywood, but that's what polarizers look like. Okay, let's see. The Zen social worker. Now you're gonna have to explain that one, bud. I mean, do you work like with like abusive families and stuff, and so you have to be Zen? So this is a great point. It's all about user experience. It is, man. And like I said, I don't want to take away anything from the YouTube reviewers because there are a lot of them, especially like the Gerald Unduns of the world and CVP, which is that outfit out of England. Um, I would love to have a shop like CVP here in the States because they seem like they're on point. I mean, they do everything from little widgets to like full on, cinematic rigs. They service everything. They're extraordinarily knowledgeable. I like the dude, the dude that they have being a presenter on all their YouTube videos. I think he's a great presenter. And so, I mean, I really like CVP a lot, and they do really good reviews on things too because they have enough practicality in there for it. Um, Dustin Abbott, he's pretty old school. He's been on YouTube a long time, but I like his reviews. He's very thorough, if a little dry, but he's very thorough, and he's somebody who is a working photographer, and so he'll go out and he'll actually show examples of different idiosyncrasies with the cameras that he uses. But like to my point, there aren't a lot of real estate photographers that are out there like reviewing cameras, and we look for different things, than even all these other people look for. Like for instance, I don't think I've ever, as part of a general camera review, even heard anybody talk about the app or the functionality of the native app or the throughput of it, the range to be able to wirelessly tether to. I mean, that's a big deal, So the modern cameras are pretty good. The Canon R5 and R5C. I have an R5C. I have had an R5 as well. Um, the range is solid. I mean, you're really not going to drop out at reasonable distances, even shooting interiors with interior walls in the way. Um, the Sonys are like that too. The A7 IV is probably about the range of the R5, R5C, maybe a little bit less on the A7 IV. The Alpha One is nuts. I mean, I've literally like had to move my van before and thought like, hey, let me just leave this thing up and see what the range is. I was able to go outside, move my van like maybe 30, 40 yards further away down the street, come back in, and the thing, and my iPad was with me the whole time. It's still tethered to my camera, that's inside the house. And so that's pretty impressive. That actually is one of the things that sold me on that camera alone. So, but my point is, you don't see anybody do that on the camera review. And why is that? I don't know. I mean, I can't be the only one. Real estate photographers can't be the only one that use the apps, right? One of the things that I absolutely despise about the R5C, and I love the R5C. I love it, and it's that camera. You know what else was that camera to me that I ended up getting rid of? Was the Pocket 6K was that camera to me. Loved it, hated it. I hated that it was a plastic football. I loved the image. I hated that it got IR pollution all over the place. But I loved the interface and how easy the Pocket 6K was to work with, right? I hated that it was big and it's hard to balance on gimbals. Like, I loved and hated that camera so much. And I'm like that with the R5C too, because the R5C is an amazing camera and you can capture incredible images with it, but its limitations are just maddening compared to even just the R5. And one of those things is you can't wirelessly tether with the R5C in video mode, period. You cannot wirelessly control the camera in video mode with the R5C, period, unless you were to buy a $1,000 Wi-Fi battery grip that doesn't even function as a battery grip because the two batteries it has in it, only one of them still is powering the camera. And that is abysmal. Everybody knows that about the R5C. The other one is just powering the Wi-Fi. So anyway, that's a different subject for a different day. Uh, yeah, face only is a saver of a feature. Love that about the Canons. I do too. And I think with the Sony's, the FX6 does it. But I think the FX6 and the FX9, I think both do the face only autofocus. And I haven't used either of those cameras, and so I've played with an FX6, but I haven't used it, for any length of time. Never even seen an FX9 in person, so I don't know, how well they work or not. But on the Canons, it actually seems that that on the C200, this is really reliable on the C200. I'm super pleased about it. It just doesn't lose you, and if it does, it doesn't do anything weird. Um, the R5C is a little bit twitchier. And in fairness, the R5C is a little bit more customizable than the C200 on the way that it does it. And so I may not have just found yet the optimal tuning for that. Let's see, how long have we been on? Half an hour, 30. See, I don't know with this StreamYard app, I don't know how many people I have watching. Like it doesn't show me that anywhere. Okay, bear with me just a second here. Let me see if I don't think I can see that anywhere. I can maximize this, and now I can't see any of the comments. And that's the other thing I don't like about this is it doesn't do a dark mode. Full screen mode, private chat messages. No, I don't want a private chat. I just want to see the comments. So, so anyway, I am probably going to end the stream here. Not that I don't like hanging out with you, James, but I don't know. I would love to be able to see how many people I have participating. And it also shows connection is fairly good. Why is my connection only fairly good? I'm hardwired into a backhaul node on my router. That's interesting. Okay. So anyway, it was good seeing all of you. I don't know how many of you I'm talking to. I know I'm talking to James. Uh, and one other guy, the Zen social worker. So, oh, and home run trot. How you doing, bud? So what is it? So you are okay. There's a countdown going on. So he's getting married in April, and so that's what? That's about 60 days or so from now. Is your soon-to-be wife? Is she crazy yet? Because she will be before that happens. So let's see what else I can see here. Yeah, so you were getting married and April 15th. Yeah. Congrats, congrats. And so let's there you are. And so home run trot, he is getting married on April 15th. And I told him that his soon to be wife approaching the wedding, she's gonna change because she's gonna be stressed out about everything. And I'll give you another one. I'll give you another little one. This one actually isn't mine, but this is something that I got told to me. So one of my groomsmen had been married twice. So he was married once and got a divorce, and then got married again just recently. When he was telling me this, and he told me, he said, you know, that day, your wedding day, is such a whirlwind of just everything going on. And he said, really try to slow down and focus because that's the only way you're really going to remember it, right? And you're spending like tens of thousands of dollars often. You want to remember it. It's the most expensive party you're ever going to throw. And he says, so just try to slow down. He says, because my first wedding, everything was just a whirlwind, and everything going on. And he says, not only remember little pieces of it, because I wasn't in the moment, I wasn't present, I wasn't slowed down. And he says, so when I went into my next wedding, my second wedding, who is now still his wife, um, he says, I was real cognizant of that, thinking back. And so I purposely just put myself in kind of more of a Zen kind of a space and slowed down. And he says, and I still didn't, I still only remember pieces of it. And so he's telling me this as I'm maybe about 60 days out or so, just like you are, from my wedding, and so I took it to heart, because this guy, I love and I trust him, and he's a really good friend of mine, and so I really took it to heart, and I'm like, okay, on my wedding day, I'm going to slow down. I'm going to do this. Um, I still only remember pieces of it, man. I mean, it's and you'll see. It's just a lot, you know, that day. People eating $100 chickens, and and somebody always gets too drunk, and I mean, it's just the whole thing, right? Okay. She's at her bachelorette party in New Orleans this weekend. It's Super Bowl weekend, man. You send her to New Orleans, Super Bowl weekend. So what are you doing? Just whatever. So my wife is going to take the kids to. She has some. My wife's a nurse, and so she has some nursing conference that she's doing later on this year, and it's at a Disney resort in Hawaii. Like I didn't even know there was a Disney resort in Hawaii, but apparently there is. It's on. Um, it's in the Honolulu area, I think, on Oahu, and uh, and she says, "Do you want to come?" No, she says, what are you gonna do? Whatever I want, maybe nothing. So, all right. So anyway, guys, it was good seeing y'all. I'm gonna watch back this stream. I'm gonna leave this one up. I killed the first R8 stream because I was having such connection issues, and I actually like that I can see that this is connection is unstable on this, and so I'm going to see what it's like. This might actually be mostly my connection, and there's not a whole lot I can do about that because that's just what's available in my area. So it's good of y'all to join in, and I'll see you again soon. Peace.